Hello and a warm welcome to Third Galaxy Empowered Live Webinar. Teachers inspire and foster knowledge as role models to the next generation. With Galaxy Empowered, we're backing these diligent teachers and empowering them to unlock new possibilities to create a brighter tomorrow. It is with great privilege that I introduce today's distinguished speaker, Ms. Deepti Sawhsney, founder and CEO of Mahatattva, a trailblazing organization dedicated to education, progressive pedagogies, and continuous professional development for educators. With over 2 decades of experience, Ms. Sawhsney has been at the forefront of integrating technology into education, leading transformative initiatives across India and beyond. Her globally recognized project, Design Thinking for Social Change, has earned accolades. It was featured as a case study by the University of Pennsylvania and got her the prestigious BET Asia Leadership Award. She has also taught a course on design thinking to school leaders at IIM Calcutta. A certified expert in distributed leadership and innovation, Ms. Sawhsney holds credentials from prestigious institutions, including Harvard Graduate School of Education, IIM Calcutta, Institute of Education London, and Trinity College, UK. Her work in developing Bhutan's Royal Academy Technology curriculum and India's first MOOC on blended learning for CBSE reaching over 1 million viewers showcases her commitment to empowering educators and redefining learning experiences. Her ability to inspire and transform has made her a sought-after thought leader and trainer, shaping the future of education through her innovative vision and collaborative efforts. We are thrilled to have Ms. Sawhsney lead today's session and share her invaluable insights. Please join me in welcoming the visionary and inspiring Ms. Deepti Sawhsney.
Hello and good evening. I would like to start with thanking everyone here for having faith in learning together. I think we've done this over the years and making this an engagement where we are deliberating on artificial intelligence and design thinking. I think when you look at it in a holistic way, it actually falls into place like a jigsaw, where you are looking at a new thing which has come in, that's artificial intelligence, and all of us are deliberating on how to integrate this in our schools, in our curricula, and in our classrooms. So I think today we are going to have this engagement where we will look at how we can do that seamlessly and have a problem-solving approach to it. So we begin today with a strategy which will help you in looking at how AI can be integrated into the classroom, and we will use a problem-solving technique called design thinking. So when we look at the future, we all want to understand, what is the future going to look like with technologies like AI coming in. And it just makes it very easy for us to understand, yes, technology is one thing which will keep on changing. It's one thing which will, urge us to look at the future in a very different way. Every time a little app or a little piece of technology is developed, we start thinking about, how are our children going to receive this and what is going to happen in the classroom. So we are going to look at technology in a way that it will cause disruption in the classroom, but at the same time, we will keep the human in the middle. So when we talk about any change in the classroom, the only person who is getting affected and who is actually going to be in the forefront is the student, the learner in the classroom. So here, if we talk about AI, a whole lot of you would have heard about it. There are different kinds of AI that we have been experiencing. It's becoming more obvious in today's nuanced world where we are looking at AI, Galaxy AI, we are looking at the Bard and now Gemini. How are these things going to change in the classroom? So if you look at the AI per se, we have looked at reactive AI. So you have something like, the chess that you play with robots. You have the predictive AI, wherein, the technology tells you where should you go for a holiday, looking at your conversations. And of course, there's generative AI. So what is the difference between these two? Why do we need to understand all of this as a teacher, a maths teacher in a primary classroom? And how can we make sure that this AI that we are talking about is going to be for the benefit of our students? So we all understand that artificial intelligence is going to transform the way we are looking at education. We all know that the capabilities are humongous. It can, do things like supporting you with the competency-based education. It can do analytics. It can look at addressing the learning gaps. But how do we get to ensure that this AI that you're getting in the classroom is actually going to benefit you? So like I said, design thinking will help you as a process to understand what this thing is. And it could be any technology. I mean, we are just looking at AI today, but if you look at it in a broader picture, it could be anything which is new in your classroom. So looking at artificial intelligence through the lens of design thinking, we will look at how design thinking can help you to foster innovation, creativity, and how can you make sure that your children are actually getting empowered by it. So what are the webinar objectives? What are we going to be understanding today? We will look at the human in the middle. We will look at how the role of people, how does it make it effective in the classroom? How does design thinking revolve around that human, that learner in your classroom? We are going to be looking at applying this design thinking methodology to specific challenges. We will take an example and we will look at that. We will also look at how do we implement it. So we have identified a channel. We have identified the process, but how does this happen in tandem? So we will look at the tools and the processes to do that. We will also look at how do we get our children, our stakeholders inspired by all of this. How do we get them to ideate? At a certain point in time, you have this mental block where you can't think beyond. So what are the tools which can help you with that? And how are you actually going to be able to implement all that? We will also look at some tools for visualization, because I think when we look at any process, 87% of us are VAC learners, visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. We need to be able to tell our own stories. So we will look at that. We will also be looking at how this testing is done. How do we make sure that there is a prototype that we can look at, and how can we implement it? How can we put it under iteration, take feedback from our stakeholders, and go ahead and actually implement it in the classrooms? So before we go any further, I think we'll do a little poll, and I'll invite all of you to take a go at this. All of us have used AI in some way or the other. So we have a whole lot of you who have used it to draft a lesson plan. And some of you have written emails. That's a 28% and rising. A lot of you, I think, have drafted a lesson plan. Very reassuring to see that there are very few people who have not used AI at all. So the general audience here has used AI in some form or the other. And the ones who are saying that they haven't used AI, I'm assuring you that you have used it unknowingly. But all of us have used AI in some way or the other. So we are looking at classroom right now. So maybe in the classroom, you haven't had the time or the inclination to do it as of now. We can see a lot of you, 34% of you have drafted a lesson plan using AI. You have used it for differentiated assessment. You have written emails and created a question paper. And I was in a school where we were looking at a specific topic, and the maths teachers actually wanted to look at a question paper which was specifically for that particular topic, and he wanted to know what kind of questions would come in an engineering test or exams that you have, entrance tests that you have. And it was amazingly beautiful when we saw these questions come up, and 10-year questions right there in front of you in a screen in about 10 seconds. Okay, so when we look at getting a little bit of a context here, when we talk about the educational landscape, what do we see? We do know that the children in the classroom, because of the strength in the classroom, we are giving them the curriculum which is the same for everyone. We have about 40 children sitting in the classroom, and our delivery is just that, because it's not humanly possible to have different kinds of delivery for a classroom. We are giving them the same kind of assessments, we are giving them the same kind of homework. So when we look at the scenario where all of us claim that we do differentiation, it is humanly not possible to be able to have pathways for each child, learning pathways for each child in your classroom. A lot of us have looked at, multiple intelligences. We have looked at giving choices to the children. But I think, hand to your heart, it is very difficult to be able to differentiate for each child sitting in your classroom. So when we look at what are the teachers facing, what is the dilemma that the teachers have when they are in the classroom? They are grading, they are providing feedback to the children on their homework. They are looking at tests, they are looking at homework, they are looking at preparing those tests. They are also looking at, report cards. They are looking at report cards as a subject per se, but looking at what each child needs help in is something which is a little difficult, and it's quite frustrating for teachers as well, because in the PTM you have this parent who comes in and suddenly you draw a blank. What was this child's name, what was this child weekend? So it's a very difficult sort of a situation for you as well. And when you look at personalizing learning for these children, for each one of them, the learning pathways, it becomes operationally challenging. It's not possible to do it. So when we look at this scenario, we know this is something we've known. As teachers, we've known that the children need their curriculum to be personalized. We actually want the children to be able to say, okay, I have reached at this stage. Now I want a content which is different from my textbook. It should match what I already know. What do you do when a child doesn't understand, say, division? Doesn't understand 4 or 5 digit division. It just gets stuck at the 2-digit division. So how do you understand? Some children have actually got on with it and some children need support. How do you get children to practice that particular thing that they are supporting? How do you understand that the children who need this kind of a support, what is that specific thing that you are looking at? Now, AI can help you with all of this. Some of you would have already tried creating a differentiated lesson plan, creating a differentiated question paper. When you look at detailed reporting, it becomes very, very difficult to be able to say that, these are the few chapters or these are the few skills that the child needs help in. Now, when you manipulate data, when you have AI systems in place to be able to pinpoint and to be able to do that seamlessly, it just makes your life easy. When we talk about what the children want, what the children need in a classroom, the same kind of things applies to the staff as well. The teachers also need to understand, what are the different ways that I can implement this curriculum. They also need to understand, what are these groups of children where I can address them in a particular way because they stand at a particular stance of a particular topic that I'm talking about. So how do we provide them with these templates, not only for their own learning plan, but also for assessing what they are learning? To be able to get on to the root cause of what is that the children need at this point in time. Okay, so let's start deliberating on why design thinking, what is design thinking. I'm sure a whole lot of you already know that. So when we look at a process for solving this, disruption in the classroom, the challenge that we have as teachers in schools, we should be looking at the human in the middle. I'm going to repeat this and I'm going to say this again and again because a whole lot of us are worried about the human connect. How the learner in the middle will stop getting that kind of importance. And a lot of the teachers also talk about, how the role of the teacher will become minuscule if AI comes in. So how are we going to ensure that that doesn't happen? We will look at why we are doing or why are we talking about design thinking. So when you look at design thinking, it focuses on empathy. All of you know that. It starts with empathy. You get into the skin of the user. So in your case, the user is the student. So when we look at the aspirations, the emotions of the user in the middle, we will get there. We will ensure that the product that comes out by our thinking and rethinking and problem solving that we are trying to do will be better just because we put empathy into it. And I think when we look at personalizing learning, because every child learns in a different way, how do we ensure that that actually gets to become an inclusive experience? So looking at technology, any kind of technology, how do we ensure that the pedagogy matches up? Or I would say, how do we ensure that pedagogy is what it is and we choose, we take that decision as to what technology is to be used, how are we going to use it, and more importantly, when am I going to use it? Very important for us to say, one class of children say, okay, let's roll in the tablets and let's do something. The teachers need to understand that it's always pedagogy first. So how are we going to make sure that that happens? We are going to look at ethical implications. We are going to look at social implications. A lot of you would already be hearing how children are doing these assignments. You will also be looking at how the parents feel that, the children are not going to be as social as they were. There are talks about us playing in the rain, us playing with the stones and the mud outside, and our children not doing that as much. So how are we going to look at design thinking? So what I'm trying to do here right now, when I'm telling you that this is what we need to do for integrating AI into the school, I want you to understand and empathize with what are the things that are coming in the world. So I have curated all these thoughts from the workshops and the engagements that I have in schools, and I'm getting it together so that when we start this process of thinking about the various steps of design thinking, you make a correlation to it. We do understand that there is a social disconnect that our children have. So how do we use design thinking to make sure that there are collaborations which happens? In design thinking, when we look at empathy, the empathy is not just from one stakeholder. You ensure that that empathy that you're getting for the user in the middle, it's from the parent, it's from the board member, it is from the management, it is from the teacher, it's from everybody who's connected in that ecosystem. The idea being that when you do that, when you understand that all stakeholders need to be involved, your product will be 80 to 90% of what you are looking at. So we ensure that not only the stakeholders come in, we ensure that the users are involved as well. So when you create the final prototype and the final product, that is something that the user has already taken part in, has already implemented, given feedback to you about. We make sure that the skills of flexibility, adaptability, these are the things that, creativity, some of you said collaboration in the word cloud as well. Resilience, I think that is something that can come through all of this process that we're talking about, so that the children get these skills no matter what the challenge is. So once you get them onto this process, the process is learned by them, and it really doesn't matter then what the challenge is. They just go on and on and on with it, and that stays instilled in their mind. Hence, the lifelong learning. We also understand that there is AI right now. There might be something else. I have been repeating this time and again because I want you to look at design thinking as this process. I want you to look at how we can look at AI adoption in the schools. Some of the schools actually have decided that they will just block the sites and they will just block ChatGPT, for instance, and that's how they're going to deal with it. So my thing is that more than 80% of your websites and anything that you access right now uses AI in some form or the other. So putting your head in the sand like an ostrich is not the answer. The answer is to take the bull by its horns and say, okay, I need to understand what you are and what you can do. And as an educator, I will decide what I do with it in the classroom. So how do we manage that? How do we navigate these challenges? And most importantly, you have these policies and these processes that you put in place, and suddenly This just vanishes because another thing comes into the school. So how do you make sure that not only do you scale this, but you sustain it as well? So these are the few things that we need to look at. And at any point in time, NEP 2020 talks about this as well. At any point in time, we have to make sure that equity, inclusiveness is something that we look at. So how do we ensure that this, what we are talking about, the process that we are talking about, ensures that everybody's needs are catered to? So these are a few things that we should keep in mind when we start looking at design thinking. And I think a lot of you have been using design thinking in your own classroom. So this is not something new to you. I've just added a few perspectives from my own interactions with people to help you understand that when you look at design thinking in your own school, make it a very holistic exercise. Make it something which is involving all the stakeholders, so that when you actually go towards that step of integrating AI, you ensure that everybody has had a take in this entire process, so that by the end of it, everybody talks about how they were part of it and how they make that decision of taking it forward in whatever direction that your school has decided. So here again, we are going to look at various steps of design thinking, and we'll take it one by one now. So instead of looking at it in tandem like I've just done for you, we will take it one step at a time. So why are we doing this? So just to sum up what I've said just now, we have to make sure that we empathize with the learner in the middle. We need to ensure that all the stakeholders are involved, just because we need a diverse perspective towards it. So when you have a challenge and you have multiple people talking about it, you just get an amazing sort of a collation of ideas which you can vet. You can see which one works and which doesn't work, and then you can take it ahead. And I think when we look at any change, a whole lot of us look at society, we look at ethical aspects of it, we look at the practical implementations of it. A whole lot of us need to understand that there are budget constraints, there is going to be time restraints, there are going to be resource constraints. So how do we make sure that we do something which actually pulls through? So when you look at the design thinking process, very, very linear, it looks like this. But when you start doing it, when you start actually immersing yourself in it, you see that it actually gets really, I would say, complex. So how do you ensure that it stays within your means is to be able to know what this entire step is, to be able to immerse yourself in the entire process, so that when you are actually doing it with your children or with your staff or with your leadership, you can look at each step of it and you can say, okay, we need to empathize. Now, when we need to empathize, we need to get all the stakeholders in. So to be able to envisage all of this, I've put an example. And the example, let's take it very plain and simple. So how do you empathize? We are looking at how do we integrate AI into our school. So looking at AI integration in the school, what will it look like if that is a challenge that I have taken, and how do I ensure that that gets integrated in the school? How do I do that stepwise? So we are going to look at the 5 stages. Empathize, so we will understand the perspectives. We will define, so we will understand, empathize, and then define what are challenges. We will ideate. So in ideate, we will look at divergent thinking, lots of ideas, no judgment. And then we will look at convergent thinking. How do we make sure that the idea which sticks is the one that we choose? So lots of strategies for that, and I will be talking about that in a minute. Then prototyping, I will tell you about a few prototypes that can happen for you to experience and take forward. And finally, once you've decided, yeah, this is the thing that I'm going to be taking forward, how do you take that prototype and test it in your school? So if we are looking at one scenario, the scenario is that there is a lot of apprehensions by the parents about what AI can do for their children in the classroom. So we are just going to take that scenario and do step one, that is empathize. So how do you do that? So we look at parents, teachers, administrators, students as well. We get them together and we get them to understand the challenge that we are looking at. That is the parents' apprehensions about using AI in the classroom. I'm just taking that as an example so that we can just go step by step towards that. So we give them the entire perspective about what the parents are saying and what is that solution that we need to come to when we are deliberating on this particular problem. So our outcome for this entire empathize stage needs to be that everybody who is involved in this process has a very clear picture of needs and the areas that where AI can bring value. So we are actually selling AI to the set of parents whom we feel are apprehensive or have told us are apprehensive about the AI use in school. So how do we get them excited about that? So first of all, we need to understand what is AI all about. And in some schools, and it's okay, the approach is absolutely fine where you limit yourself to a classroom, maybe 6th, 7th, and 8th. Maybe you want to do 9th to 12th. You restrict yourself for the prototyping, the issuing out of policies and experiences to the children. You understand, this is what we are going to do. So you choose the kind of audience that you're going to be rolling out this product to. That's absolutely fine as well. So how do you get the people to understand what is the challenge? So you empathize, you get the emotions in, you get the aspirations of the parents, and you talk all about that. But you keep in mind that this cannot be like all over. It cannot be like you cannot be talking about it all the time. It needs to have a time limit. You will have resources which has a constraint on the financials. So how are you going to manage that? So do your thinking, do your empathizing, but keep it in context. And you also, by the end of it, do some lesson observations, talk to a few children and find out what is actually happening on the ground. So that when you look at this as a challenge, how is AI going to be used in the school, make sure that you have a complete perspective to all of this. There are a few strategies that you can use. One of them is the Eisenhower matrix, wherein you take all these challenges that you have got in regarding the use of AI in your school, whatever perspectives that you have found. Like I said, this is divergent thinking, so it'll really go wild. So how are you going to prioritize this? So this matrix actually gets you to prioritize. So if there is something that you find which is urgent and important, you do it now. If there is something which is important but not so urgent, you decide when to do it and who does it. If it's not important but it's urgent and you as a leader probably can't do it right now, you delegate that job. And if it's important and not urgent, you delete it straight away. It's something that can be put in the back burner for something which you delegate for later. So this is one of the for empathizing. This is one of the tools that you can use. Another one that you can use is starbursting. So you put the challenge in the middle. In our case, it is the parents' apprehensions about using AI in the classroom. You have a look at this. You get them to understand who is going to do this challenge, who is going to get affected by this challenge. Now, these question stems are there for you to train your thinking. Now, the stem is there, but you can end it up with anything. Who's going to do it? Who's going to be affected? Who are the people who are actually running the show? What is that is getting affected? What do we need to do for it? Where is it going to happen? Is it 6 to 8, 9 to 12, that kind of a scenario? When are you going to implement it? What's your timeline? Why are you doing it? Because the parents said that they are apprehensive. And how are you going to actually implement this? So when you are sitting together as a team and you're deliberating about this, I think these are the questions that you should put in front of yourself and look at what your team members are saying for it. I'm getting on to the next step, which is defining the problem. Now, when you look at the problem statement, we need to focus on what are the things that can actually get impactful and which can solve the problems. So you have to set your priorities right in the middle for that. You have to look at how might we question. So how might we make the learning more accessible, and how do we make AI something which is like a tool in the hands of the students. I'm going to, in this instance, I'm going to read out a few of the questions which came up in one of the a face-to-face interaction that I had. The people framed a few of the how might we questions. So defining is something where you need to be able to do that. So I have one which says, how might we integrate AI into classrooms to enhance personalized learning while ensuring transparency and ethical use? So you see, whatever I have been talking about from the beginning, the different perspectives that we've got, what are the 7 tenets that we should be looking at when we do design thinking. So after the deliberation that the staff members had with me, these are the how might we definitions that they've come through. How might we? So defining what the problem statement is, the core of what you're going to do with it. So another one is, how might we reassure parents that AI in school supports holistic development without compromising data privacy or human interaction? So all these things that we have been talking about in the previous slides has actually percolated into this one challenge statement. So to be able to empathize with all the stakeholders and to be able to articulate what that problem statement is going to look like. Some of the strategies that you can use, this is for deeper understanding, is the 5 whys analysis. So you can use this tool for step 2, where you can look at, what are the questions that you can ask. So why are you concerned about the use of AI in schools? Because it feels like AI might reduce the human touch. This is what the parents feel. Why do you feel that AI might reduce the human touch in education? Because I heard that it can replace teachers in certain tasks. So why do you think AI will replace the teachers? Can you see how it's just building up the questions based on the previous answer, and it just goes deeper and deeper and deeper. So why do you think AI will replace? Because technology is advancing quickly, and I'm unsure how it will be implemented. So why are you uncertain about the implementation? Why does it worry you? Because I don't have enough information about how schools will use AI responsibly. So basically, it is all about your presence. What do you convey to the parents? What are you talking to them about AI use? Maybe you're not saying anything at all, and that's the reason why they have their apprehensions. And most importantly, I think visibility is paramount. So if you understand what are the policies, what are the processes that we are looking at, there's no way that the parents will have those kind of apprehensions. So that was your empathize, and this is your define. And some of the other strategies that you can use is how might we. So you have a whom, what, where, why. You can also have the 5 whys and a how. So that's up to you. How do you get the the teachers or the participants of your workshop? How do you get them to understand and dig deeper from empathize to define, to be able to have a clear vision of what their challenge spells out to be? So that's something that you need to look at. And then you look at ideation. So how do you get your people, your stakeholders, to be able to ideate? And here is what your divergent thinking and your convergent thinking again comes in. And to be able to ideate with different stakeholders with different perspectives, and you will have these kind of people in your own parent community. So you will have people who will be into technology, you will have people who will be in cybersecurity, you will have people who are psychologists, you have people who can help you with all these kind of things. So make sure that the team that you build for doing this kind of design thinking is like really, really cohesive. So how do you do that? So you ideate, you assess the ideas for feasibility, scalability, and alignment. What was your initial goal? So finally, I think the outcome of the ideate step should be that you should get about 5, 6, 10 solutions to what are you going to be using this for the challenge that you identified right at the beginning. So one of the strategies that you can use for that is Scamper. And Scamper really puts things in perspective. So when you are looking at a particular solution, you can substitute it. You can look at, what can it be substituted with? So you have the apprehension of the parents. So what can we do to reduce that apprehension? What can you combine it with so that you reassure the parents? How can you adapt it to be able to look at what are the existing practices in the school? So how can those be adapted? How do you modify it? So what are these aspects of AI which can be modified? Maybe there's a policy in place. Maybe the children have a AUP and they know what are the things that are acceptable and what are the things which are not acceptable. How do you put it to another use? How do you, change or flip that utility for this particular thing? How do you ensure that some of the things which you are doing as a practice in school, how do you eliminate those? And what are the things which can be reversed or rearranged to shift that perspective which is there, which your parents have? So how do you do that quickly? Another strategy for you to be able to do this is mind mapping. And this is something that we do very often. So how do you analyze? What are the objectives? What's the strategy? What action will be taken? How can you revise this entire thing? How do you rearrange this entire thing? And what's the solution that you come up with? So each of those perspectives that you have gathered, or each of the divergent thinking that you did to be able to come to convergent thinking, how do you narrow down that solution that you have? You could be using mind mapping. Finally, once you have ideated, you have defined, you have looked at what is this thing that I want to create to be able to provide a solution, you build a prototype. Now a prototype need not be something which is 3D. It need not be something which is made out of electronics or just cardboard. It can be a question paper. Your prototype can be a circular. It doesn't need to be something 3D. What I'm trying to say here is that when we look at the prototyping of our design thinking process, it could be how do I make the most effective circular for our parents? Here we are looking at AI apprehensions, but my challenge could be how do I create the most effective circular for parents? If that's the case, your prototype could be this very comprehensive circular, and then you give it out for iterations, feedback from colleagues. So what does this prototype look like? It's a different types. There can be prototypes which are like really varied. So you can have a low fidelity one, which could be just a sketch. So, you do have these workshops where you do prototyping and it's a quick sketch that you do. You can have a middle fidelity one, which could be digital mock-ups, maybe 2-3 months worth of work. You can do high fidelity ones where your prototype is actually very close to resembling the final product. So how do you work towards that? You can do role playing. So instead of creating the prototype, you could be doing a role play. You could have, like I said, the physical prototype. So they can be 3D models as well. You could have the Wizard of Oz. So the stimulated systems having a human behind to be able to say, okay, this is what the prototype's looking like. Ask the audience for some sort of feedback, and then you work towards the iteration of that prototype. You can have interactive prototypes like on a screen, and children are doing that in a jiffy nowadays. You can also have iteration 1, 2, 3. So you have, like, for the first semester, you work on a particular prototype and you say, this is what it is. You run it through, do a pilot, you get feedback from all the stakeholders. You make sure that whatever you are doing, that prototype is actually visible and the parents know about what you're doing. So if it is a prototype for what AI will look like in the school, you will put a policy in place. You will make sure that you have identified the classrooms, you have identified what kinds of apps that the children are going to be using. So you have that absolutely out there. And that could be iteration 1. Slowly and gradually you move towards something which is, more complex, something which is more financed, absolutely something which is moving towards the final product. But like I said, in design thinking, iterations are more valuable than the end product. The process is more important than the end product. We do need to get to the end product as well, but design thinkers never think as their product as the very end product. It always has scope for doing something better to it. One of the prototypes that you can do, and this is something which is in the corporate world as well. So, the experience prototyping, you get the people to experience what this is. So, this is something which can work very well in the classroom situations as well, where you create a prototype and you get the children to actually go through it and then take feedback from the various stakeholders. One of the very famous examples of experience prototyping is by McDonald's. So McDonald's decided that they need a new product and they thought it was going to be spaghetti. So they created an experience of McSpaghetti. They put it on the menu boards. It was there on the teller machines. Everything was like a mock experience. So the teller people, the people who were operating the tellers were told that when somebody comes and asks you for it, you just have to say that, oh, it just finished, it was there. I'm so sorry, but can you order something else? And as a routine, they were supposed to count how many people asked for McSpaghetti. So without spending any money, McDonald's actually created a prototype where they got people to experience it, ask for it, and understand where if it was feasible to get a product like this in the market or not. And at the end, they didn't, because not enough people asked for it. So you can have an experience of prototyping as well. We are also, looking at the scenarios. So you can have scenario 1, scenario 2, and you can, because you have sections in your school, you can have the different scenarios running in different sections. Or you can have a grade 6 doing something, grade 7 doing something, and +1, and grade 8 doing everything and +1, +2. So you will be able to look at the what if situations. So you could have a classroom where they're not using AI at all. You could have one classroom where they are, using AI, but with a very limited few tools. And you could have a classroom where children actually are using whatever that they want to use. To be able to look at learning outcomes, to be able to look at how they are actually, supporting the learning, personalizing the learning, giving comprehensive feedback to the children will actually be the weapon that you can use to convince the parents that this is what happens when we start using AI in the classroom. When we look at this kind of situation, you can have variability to that as well. So I read somewhere in which a teacher actually created AUP in a classroom, acceptable use policy in the classroom, that children can use AI if they want, but she had a traffic light in place. So she said that I'm going to give you assignments, but if the assignment has a red sign on it, it means that you cannot use AI at all. If the assignment has a yellow, that means you can use it, but you talk to me, let us find out where you are with your understanding, and then we will together decide whether we want to do this and go ahead with using AI or not. And if the assignment has green, then you can go ahead and use what you want. So this is something which a teacher did to be able to understand, how are the children using AI and how can she, moderate that what if situation. So to be able to do that, I think doesn't need much planning, but you can make a very clear sort of a demarcation as to what happens if I do this. So that's your scenario testing. The final step is your testing. So how do you make sure that whatever you have created, whatever you have introduced, whatever is the prototype that you are finally getting on for testing, how do you make sure that that goes into the system? So how do you test it? So when we are looking at testing these prototypes, I think here also you should be looking at creating pilots and not going full on hungo, to be able to do this very, very specifically in a controlled group, and also to be able to gather data. So once you have deployed a certain solution in your classroom or in your school, how do you ensure that the children are giving that feedback back? How are you ensuring that there is data which is being collected? Because end of it, you have to ensure that this is something that you want to take forward. And if you want to take this forward, what is that data? What is the evidence saying? So for you to be able to deploy a pilot, you have to make sure that you have some sort of gathering data sort of system in place, so that you can validate what you have churned in, and also to be able to change gears to say this is working, this is not working, so what do we do with this? So we need to have a path where we are continuously refining our own system, to be able to look at pain points very, very neutrally, to be able to say this is something which is going wrong, how do I make it better? So based on constructive feedback. And I remember this incident where in one of the schools here in Delhi, which is like really high on design thinking, and there are this small children who are running around during the day where we celebrate the learning, and there's this small child who comes up to me and says, how is this work that I've done? And after I have looked at it and said, fantastic work, this is looking superb, you've done a brilliant job, he says, miss, that all is fine, but can you give me some feedback? I want to make it better. So I think this is something which gets into the culture of the school, something which you work for, back and forth. You keep saying, how do I make this better? How do I make sure that it keeps getting better and better with constructive feedback, which comes from my own stakeholders? To be able to do that, I think when you are accomplished in that kind of a pattern, in that kind of a process where you are open to what your user is saying, and to be able to take that constructive feedback and put it back in the loop and say, okay, I had tested this prototype, I have got this constructive feedback, how do I now take it back to the empathize stage? How do I make sure that that is addressed yet again? So to be able to be iterative is something that becomes innate to you when you are working with design thinking. So looking at this entire step 1, step 2, step 3, 4 and 5, how do you make this go on and on? It was linear. I did show you a linear diagram where it went into a very linear sort of a frame, but because of iteration, because of constructive feedback, we loop it back again. These are the scenarios that I was talking about. You can have A, B, C testing. You have varied solutions. So these are strategies for your step 5, to be able to do A, B testing, to be able to look at the same thing functioning in 2 different what-if scenarios. So what is that parameter or criteria that you've changed in both of them? So how do you do that? To be able to talk to your parents, to be able to have a focus group discussion with them, to be able to say, okay, we've done this is the step. Here again, visibility and being there for your parents, getting them to understand that this is a feedback that we got from you and we are working on this, to be able to share their experiences of what happened in that pilot that you did. This is something which should be part of your entire process, to be able to discuss with them openly, how did this go? What are the few changes that you liked, what you did not like, and how can we make it better? So looking at this entire, frame, we are looking at design thinking in a nutshell as a design, as a user-centric problem-solving process, which can help you do things which are extraordinary, to be able to understand that the learner is right in the middle of any problem solving technique, to be able to see that when we look at design thinking, it becomes one of the things that you do to start working on the challenges that you have. And then the challenge might change. It really doesn't matter what the challenge is. What really matters is what is that process that you take forward? What is that process that you get onto the iterative loop? And what is that process which you are willing to give constructive feedback on? So, how do you get that activated in your school? So, when we look at design thinking, when we look at, in this case, for this case of this webinar that we are having, how do we get AI into the schools? I have given you an example, and you can try this in your schools. This is a ready-made template for you to be able to execute in your school. But the leaders, and by leaders, I mean all the teachers, the educators, facilitators in the school, you need to understand when we talk about how do we make these changes in a school which is going to try something which is as disruptive as AI, but disruptive in a very, very, I would say, positive sense, because we have seen that it can just turn your classroom around. So, how do you ensure? So, keeping your empathy in mind, how do we ensure that AI will ensure that it supports student learning? That is something which is non-negotiable. So you can have a flash in the pan, you can have this technology and the other technology coming up, but empathy has taught you that the learner in the middle is the most important being in our ecosystem. So if I'm looking at integrating AI, how does that affect the learner in my classroom? What are the tools that my students are going to use, and what are the tools that will be in progression of skills? So we will have grade 6 to 8 doing something, and what is 9 to 12 doing in that stage. It's very important for you to understand that there needs to be a progression according to the cognitive abilities of our children. It's very important to understand that they will channelize this information in a very different way. And all of us know that when AI was developed, when it was initiated, and even today, it learns. It's machine learning, right? So the models on which it is taught are not appropriate for children. So how do we make sure that that element is fixed into our discussions when we empathize and start the design thinking process on how do we integrate AI into our schools? We also need to understand, and this is the most important thing for any school to understand, any leader to understand, that unless and until your teachers are empowered, unless and until your teachers know the nuances of AI, of design thinking, and how to get it in, no way is this change happening. So we have to get the teachers empowered, and that is something which we need to do as a school. We need to be able to deliberate on what are the opportunities that I'm giving to my teachers to be able to do all of this. So we do have, at this point in time, we do have a small sort of a section where we will be looking at questions from you, and I will try to answer those questions to my best of abilities. If you can just put your questions in chat, or if the studio can help me unmute somebody who wants to ask a question, and we'll try and do that in a bit. So can you raise your hand? There is a hand which is raised. So Supriya has a question. Go ahead, Supriya.
Ma'am, one question is like how children can add on with this with any software or any practical thing. Like when you just summed it up, that design thinking is flexible and it is very helpful for solving our problems. So how we can just implement it with some with some syllabus or something?
So I think that's a very good question, Supriya. So when we are looking at design thinking as a problem solving technique, what I showed you or shared with you just now is the process, right? But when you are introducing a new topic to the children, you can start with the same process that we spoke about. You'll need to fine tune it a little. So suppose you're teaching them Python, right? You are starting a new chapter with them. You can get them to empathize with what's going to happen if we learn Python. So you need to create a scenario for them to be able to empathize with the topic that they're going to be learning, right? So any design thinking starts with children, in this case, understanding what is this entire scenario going to look like if I learn how to use Python. I mean, that's just one of the examples that I can give you. You can also show them a whole lot of examples of the end product of language learning. And then I'm just presuming that you are a computer teacher.
Yes. I am coding and AI. I teach both.
Yes.
I teach
Yeah,
Python
I
also.
could guess as much. So when we look at introducing a new language like Python, so maybe you can have some end products shown to them and tell them to be able. Yeah, so just flip, instead of telling them this is what we are learning and at the end showing them these are the products, start with the products.
Okay, showing them the end product and just telling them how we can reach it here.
Yes, and getting them to empathize with what happens when we learn Python. What are the various scenarios?
Great, thank you.
Jill, I think, has her hand up. Yeah, sharing. I can see your hand. Maybe somebody can unmute you as well.
Hello, this is Jill here. My
Yes,
doubt
hi, Jill.
is that you said like we can integrate AI with all our subjects and in regular. But is there any specific age group where we should introduce this, or can it be done from the very beginning, like a primary level?
Yeah. So in my own curriculum at Mahatattva, we introduce design thinking for 3-year-olds. But like I said, the progression is cognitively appropriate for 3-year-olds. So the example that I'm going to give you is that the 3-year-olds think about summer and they think about how hot they feel and what the birds would be feeling. So the empathy starts with birds feeling hot, and they create a bird feeder depending upon what kind of materials to use, what are the things that can come into play, what are the things that will actually sustain the water in them. So these are the various things that they look at when they're ideating. And for the prototype stage, they put the bird feeder in different, or bird bath in different spots to be able to see which spot has the maximum bird droppings, where do the maximum birds come, to be able to say this is the right place to put the bird bath. So design thinking is innate to us. As a human being, you all do problem solving first. You see something, the first urge is how do I set it right? So we all do design thinking in our minds. We are all design thinkers. It's only that I put a frame, Stanford has put a frame work to it, and we are all adapting it to our own needs. Does that answer your question?
Namaste, ma'am.
Hi, Sharing. Namaste.
Yeah, ma'am, I have a very simple question. Since this is a Samsung Galaxy AI Empowered Teachers for Tomorrow webinar, what is Samsung offering for educators and schools if they are interested in buying their products? I mean, because Samsung Galaxy, as you know, ma'am, they have a lot of AI features and which we can use to integrate.
Yes. So. Yes, absolutely. So that's a very good question. And just to let you know that I cannot tell you a whole lot right now, but the subsequent 2 sessions that we have, we will be deliberating on, how can we use the Galaxy or the Galaxy AI features and the various other features that Samsung has been using for teaching and learning. Samsung is not a new actor in the academic field. It's always been there. And I think this is an initiative to churn that thinking first. So the sessions that we are having with you all, I just had a question from a computer teacher who said, how do I fix design thinking into my classroom or into my lesson? So the idea for these webinars is to churn your thinking, and we will be talking about the use case. We will talk about the different hardware and the different apps that can be used for subsequent use in your classrooms. Thanks for
Thank
that
you, ma'am.
question.
Thank you.
Any other question? Okay, so we are very close to the end of the session, and there are a few things that I need all of you to know before we go away. So in the next webinar, we will be talking about digital leadership. We will be talking about 5 tenets and how strategy, policy, and resourcing will actually get you to do technology integration seamlessly in your classrooms. We will be looking at connectivity. How does that connectivity element comes in when you are doing things in your classes? What are the devices? What are the things that need to be kept in mind when you think of buying these devices for your schools? We will look at what is that platform. Is the platform seamless? Is it something that will give you, I would say, energy to be able to sit in that class and execute a lesson seamlessly? And most importantly, how does your pedagogy change when you get this technology element into the classrooms? And I know from experience that when we start using technology in the school, things that you did not even think of suddenly come into the picture. So when you look at, how do I make sure that roll number 23 becomes Arjun, and Arjun has a profile and a portfolio and data analytics for me to say Arjun has not understood fractions. So how does that change just happens in your classroom when you start using technology? So how do you up your technology game? And I think that is something we need to understand to be able to put design thinking and AI into perspective. How do we integrate that technology? So as always, thank you so much for listening in, for being here, to be able to, some of you did have a discussion with me as well, and I'm sure a whole lot of you that I can see here will ping me and message me, and we will discuss this further. But I want you to keep one message in mind, and this is something that I always end my sessions with, that technology will always come and edge you to say, this is happening, this is going to happen in the future, this is something that you should do or you shouldn't do. But I just want to end with one note which says that you are educators. Technology might tell you what the future holds, but as educators, we are the ones who are the creators of this future. So thank you so much for joining in. It was lovely, doing this for you. All my years of experience of design thinking culminating into this webinar, and I'll see you on the 10th of January. Thank you so much.
This was great. All thanks to you, Ms. Sahani, for endowing us with your precious time and conducting this energizing session. It was our pleasure to have you as a trainer, and a massive thanks to all the teachers for taking the time to attend this webinar. Your dedication to shaping the future is commendable. Please tune in for the next webinar.